and you can kind of just sit and look at all the different texture.
What I noticed observing before I went outside, because you guys broke off, and when we were in the museum, you guys went one direction, I went the other. But I was looking out that window where the living wall was, and it was so funny how even adults' behavior was markedly different when they were outside around that wall. People were much less stoic, shall we say?
Yeah.
And much happier, and you saw a lot of people smiling. And then as soon as they came back in around all the modern art, they all looked like they were more serious. Yeah, they were all very somber.
Weird, huh?
It was. I'll tell you what my big takeaways were. First of all, you and I having been to a lot of museums, it's fascinating to me. Just fascinating. I don't really have an opinion on it. That when you're in a modern art museum, there's always, you see the art, whatever it is, and it's mostly beautiful stuff, and then you see this long explanation of not just the artist, which is fascinating, but also what the art was supposed to mean, what it's supposed to represent. And they get into all sorts of usually political and social causes and just different reasons that they were motivated. A lot of the modern art was going back all the way back to World War II, and you were talking about the socialism, the Nazism, and all the types of things that were going on that were that. And it was fascinating to read those things, but it was really interesting on the stuff that was made from maybe the 60s or the 70s forward. You would see 5 circles on a canvas, and then there was 4 paragraphs explaining what those 5 circles were supposed to represent. I just thought that was interesting from a multitude of levels. But the art, the descriptions were oftentimes, for me, more interesting to read than the art itself was to look at, because the descriptions were, in some cases, were just written so well. I personally took pictures of the descriptions and not of the art, because
There's a lot of good writing. That's true.
Oh, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the other thing is we were Roy Lichtenstein. So I forget, 4th floor, 5th floor, whatever it was. There's just acres and acres of these Roy Lichtenstein modern paintings, which I liked those. They were interesting. It wasn't just some sort of there were 2 different artists in here, just getting away from Roy Lichtenstein for a second, in the museum that had their art on display. And these were private collections for the most part that people were lending to the museum. But they were these big, massive, essentially red or burgundy squares, and that was what it was, with 4 paragraphs explaining why the artist was motivated just to basically paint a burgundy square. I'm not exaggerating. And then you go around the corner and maybe do a different floor, and you see these Roy Lichtensteins, and then there were not these big breathy explanations of what the art was. It was Roy Lichtenstein, here's a brief bio, where he was born, his basic
facts.
But it wasn't all this big breathy explanation trying to sell to you why you're supposed to like that particular piece of art, or what the artist was thinking when they made the art. Now, I juxtaposition that in my mind to when you and I have gone to more traditional museums that weren't modern, where the art would have been from the Renaissance, or the art would have been from the classics and the Impressionists, right? And there was no big breathy description of what you were looking at. You would see, usually, because most of these paintings were just ancient, like the ones you'd see in Italy, for example, or even